For the prayers. We've been asking constantly for prayers, and we experience that strength of prayers that you accompany us in our work, and we pray that the Holy Spirit will guide us in the remaining days and the remaining weeks. In this time of reflection, several things have come, and I think it's worth also to give thanks to God that you see that we have different experiences in various areas and in various parts of the world. And we as a church in Africa have also a lot to offer even to the universal church. Amongst the things that obviously have come are the joy of our church, the understanding of our community, and the strength of communion that we in Africa experience more this community than in many parts of the world. It has been very good to experience that, call it cross-pollination, that sharing of experiences that we are given one church in one place to another. We've also spoken a lot about the core responsibility, that every baptized Christian is responsible for the
TV.
And forward ever, backward never. So move ahead. Ahead, ahead.
Endelea kutazama Capuchin TV. Kitambulisho Katoliki.
To the break, and then he had to leave the hall. And during this stage, we listened to the first reports of the small groups on sections B21 and B22 of the Instrumentum Laboris, which you have. The congregation was open with a thanks to the Pope for the apostolic exhortation that was published yesterday. C'est la confiance devoted to Saint Teresina. And there was a big round of applause by those who were present. And also today was the anniversary of the election of John Paul II, and at 3 there is going to be a Mass in St. Peter's to commemorate this day. And also some other important anniversaries were remembered today. Cardinal Ulrich, Marcel Luthen, and His Excellency Anthony McKinley. And so today it's their anniversary, the anniversary of their ordination. And also Professor Anna Rollins will receive a prize tomorrow, Open Reason 2023, and she received also a round of applause. This award was created by the Ratzinger Foundation. And we also said that last Friday, a meeting of the ordinary members of the Synod, a meeting was held. They will remain until next October. And so it was an opportunity to take stock of the situation at this stage of the synodal journey. There were 3 interventions by members of the Synod, ordinary members, to highlight the quality of listening and the experience we are making, the fraternity which is experienced, the beauty of the time we are giving ourselves to be able to be converted and to listen to each other, to discern. And in the understanding that this can be a bit more difficult to relate to the media, to tell the media vis-à-vis this intention of giving immediate answers. But so we spoke about the beauty of this time that the Assembly is giving itself to be able to learn synodality, so that when we get back to our own countries and in our dioceses, continents, cities, and places, in a way we will all be a bit different compared with the way we were when we arrived, and that we are we feel like a family, and the beauty of sharing in fraternity and with serenity our convictions. And the fact that the focus of the Synod is synodality, precisely, and we have entrusted our prayer and our exchanges and our discussions. These are all going to be entrusted to the Pope, because the Pope is going to give us the direction to follow for our journey at the end of the Synod. Now I'm giving the floor to Sheila to get into the details of some of the topics that were addressed, starting from section B21 and B22 of the Instrumental Laboris. Sheila, the floor is yours.
Muito boa tarde, mais uma vez, e good afternoon, buonasera. So, as Paulo has just said, listening was once again highlighted throughout today's session, morning session. The other highlights were synodality. I mean, what is the meaning of synodality, learning more about synodality, because although some churches may have experienced synodality, others haven't. So it was still a learning process to some. And also the diversity, the richness of our diversity, that was also highlighted, and how we should preserve the richness of our diversity. We also spoke about the image, or rather the church. We spoke about the church and the roles that we all play within the church, and how, just like the body, we have different parts, and together we make up the body, each part with its own function. The other topic or point of reflection was missionary activity, the role of the laity, the family, what is the role of the family? Ecumenism and interreligious dialogue was once again highlighted during today's discussions. We spoke about evangelization in the digital era, without forgetting those that come from poorer countries. As much as so many young people may be into the digital era, we cannot forget that there are other young people who don't have this privilege. So we highlighted that as well. And of course, ongoing formation for both the laity, the priests, and that was also addressed. And the whole issue of clericalism also was stressed today, came up. I want to say stressed, but it did come up. And yes, the topic that many people are asking about, issues related to women, the role of women in the church, related to the inclusion of women, the recognition of women, and the female diaconate was also addressed. But this is not the end. We are still having more presentations, so these conversations are still ongoing. We're still discerning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for the synthesis of the themes of this morning. Grazie.
Now we can perhaps pass on to our guests who are here with us today, our guests here at the briefing, and I would like to give the floor right away to Reverend Father Vimal Tirimanna, Redemptorist from Sri Lanka, Professor of Theology at the Alphonsiana University, who has followed the synodal process right from the beginning, because if I'm not mistaken, he was also a member of the committee that was responsible for the theological part, and I would like to thank him and give him the floor.
In fact, I think I may not have much to add with regard to the proceedings of today, because both Sheila as well as Paolo have already spoken about a resume, actually, a summary proceeding of what happened today. But if I were to say something about the synodal process as a whole till today, since it began, the sessions as such, I must say I am becoming more and more optimistic. Because I, as you know, am a professor of theology, moral theology, and also I, by nature, expect results. And before coming this time for this assembly, I was wondering how much this is going to be theory, how much of that is going to be practical. Although I was involved all along, from the very beginning, when the Synodal Secretariat started the Synodal process, in theory I was at home, but I was wondering how the theory and the practical levels would be gapped. But the good news is now, by now, this is the beginning of the third week, I am seeing how synodality is lived. I remember, even when we were deliberating, much before the synodal sessions began with the Secretariat, and I was in the Theological Commission also till last July when I was appointed a full-time member of the Synod. What we heard was, again and again from others, synodality happens when you do it. I thought this is just a cliche, just for the sake of saying, rattling off things. But I must admit, ever since we began that retreat at Sacrofano, until today, thanks mainly to the great atmosphere of prayer, heavily complemented by the spiritual conversation, the method of spiritual conversation, we see how the synodal process, rather the synodal way of living, is already lived. I will just give you one illustration. You have heard it from this very table again and again, but permit me to say this. The round tables themselves are a symbol of the ecclesiology of Lumen Gentium. This synodal process is not a private agenda of Pope Francis. It is a continuation of Vatican II. Of course, Church had so many other things to face during the last 5 decades or so. But now, the Vatican II theology, rather the ecclesiology of Vatican II, is being revived. 2 concepts. I stop with that. People of God, based on baptism. People of God and baptism. These are the 2 poles. So when you sit around the table, my experience, dear friends, has been, this is the 3rd table I am sitting at, cardinals, bishops, lay people, mainly lay women, rubbing their shoulders with the hierarchy in a concentric church, not a pyramidal church. Not that the pyramidal church is bad, we need that. But the ecclesiology of Lumen Gentium is lived. Synodal way, the culture of synodality is lived here. The challenge is to take it outside the synod hall. Thank you.
Grazie. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Father. Thank you for this witness of living synodality, di synodalità vissuta, di come anche si collega.
Lived synodality and the way in which this synodality is related to some essential text from the Council. We're now going to give the floor to Sister Patricia Murray from the Institute of a Blessed Virgin Mary, who is also Executive Secretary of the International Union of Superiors General.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share. And I would like to build on what you've just heard. You know, as a member of a religious congregation, I feel that we have been putting synodality into practice for over 20 years, particularly as we were making decisions and coming to conclusions about things that mattered in our lives. And putting Jesus and the Spirit at the center of our life and listening to the voice of everyone in a religious community in order to discern where God is calling one at this time, where God is calling the congregation, has been a practice of many congregations. So for me, it's an added joy to see this spread in the universal church, that this is the way that we want to live and be together. Those words of participation, communion, and mission. I mean, we're affirming in these days just the mission of the baptized, and then you have the ministerial mission, but we're all on mission. We're all bringing the good news to wherever we are. And increasingly, we know the complexity of the contexts in which we live and the needs of people, and particularly listening to those who feel excluded and on the margins of life. And more, to create spaces, listening spaces, spaces of accompaniment. The act really is to go as deep as possible. For me, this discernment journey is not just this month. I'm so happy that, in fact, there are 2 stages to this, because as the themes come up and are reflected on through the conversations in the Spirit from many different perspectives, we're holding a unity in our diversity. We're listening to very different opinions. We're allowing them to enter and to nourish ourselves and to listen to what God is speaking through these various voices and these differences of opinion. And at the same time, we, in a way, have to go deeper over the next number of months till we return again in a year's time. That's how discernment happens. You're led deeper each time to deeper questions. So what might start, for example, as questioning roles and functions ends up as asking a much deeper question about the mission of all the baptized in the church today. So for me, I see the different stages as been very important. We've been asked, for example, to prepare individually before we come to the round table. So that calls you to do your own personal prayer, reflection, and preparation. So you're not talking just and reacting to something, but you've really thought deeply about what you're asked to reflect on in the group. And then in that process, you've heard it several times in this room, I'm sure, but in listening to those different voices, you can feel one's own position being widened, broadened, deepened, because of different contexts, cultures, different perspectives, very different opinions, different ecclesiologies, and so forth. And then the deep, respectful conversation does lead you, at the end of the day, to a different place. So for me, naming the tensions, naming the areas that we still have further work to do is important in this process. And that's why I'd be, saying time is a gift. And we have to use that time, the time when we meet together, but then the time between our 2 synodal assemblies, to use that as a church as a whole for further prayer, reflection, and discernment. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sister Patricia Murray. Thank you also for underlining this aspect of a personal path of prayer, which is a bit at the basis of that experience of listening and accompaniment and unity and diversity, which you mentioned. Diamo ora la parola.
We're now going to give the floor to His Excellency Monsignor Zdeněk Wasserbaj, Auxiliary Bishop of Prague, who is with us here today, and thank you for your presence. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I am very grateful to Mr. Ruffini, who at the beginning of this press conference mentioned the new apostolic exhortation of Pope Francis that was given to us as a gift yesterday when we were celebrating Saint Teresa of Avila. We were celebrating her day. I think it's very important because today at the Synod, I felt this word mission very strongly. Saint Teresa of Lisieux, we know she is a patroness of missions, patron saint of missions, and mission is one of the 3 key words for mission: union, participation, and mission. Yesterday in the afternoon, when I finished with my Sunday commitment, I realized that a new apostolic exhortation had been published, and so at the end of the evening, I devoted the night to read this new apostolic exhortation, and it is very interesting as well as important. I found many important aspects, but I would like to mention 2. First of all, Saint Teresa of Lisieux, when she entered the Carmel, she was looking to save souls. So she was looking for the good of the others. And this, for me, is very important because after more than 2 weeks at the Synod, meeting almost 400 people every day during the breaks for a coffee or the coffee breaks or during the retreats that we spent together in Sacrofano. Truly, I have felt very strongly that the Synod saw the participation of 400 people who love the others. And this, I think, is very important. The fact that here in Rome there are 400 people who are good people, who are devoting their time to help the others. I know that we cannot talk about what we say during the General Assemblies or in small groups, but perhaps I can mention that one of this morning's speakers said that the mission, what is the mission? What do we mean by mission? Mission is a will to free the others and save them, bring them salvation. So the mission is for the good of humankind, of all the others. And then the second thing that I was particularly touched by in reading this new apostolic exhortation, towards the end, where it is said that Thérèse of Lisieux towards Easter 1896 started to truly experience a night, obscure night of faith, a deep night. And it was interesting that this night or darkness was directly put in connection with the painful reality of atheism, which at the end of the 19th century was particularly strong. Some historians say that this was the golden age when the ideas of Marx and Engels spread slowly all over the world. And I am very happy that this was mentioned there, because even before, when reading all these books by Thérèse, I never realized how important this was for her. And I'm here as a bishop from the Czech Republic, one of the Central European and Eastern European countries which are of a post-communist background. So I personally felt and experienced this tragedy of communism, and I can say that in a sense, it has really culturally destroyed our nations, also spiritually destroyed them from several points of view. And this is something that really touched me, that I was really touched by. Thérèse speaks about the night, not just the night of her soul, but also the night of the world and for Europe. And some say that even the Church in the third millennium is experiencing this darkness, let's say. Well, it depends on the point of view, but it seems to me that this synod truly helps us. If there is darkness, if there is this night in the life of the Church, and after these 2 weeks, I truly believe that this synod helps us shed light and bring light to these nights, in this darkness, in the darkness of the life of the Church in the third millennium. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your words, and thank you for establishing this, for connecting today's work and of the Synod more in general to the new exhortation that was offered to us by the Pope last Sunday. And also thank you also for this faith you have in other people's faith, and for talking about the darkness and the night of faith. But if there is night, there is also daylight, as you were saying. So we have heard these witnesses on the experience which is being gained in these days. But let us now give the floor to journalists for their questions. And let's see who have raised their hands. Perhaps today we can begin from this side with Joshua.
Yeah, I'm Joshua McElwee of the National Catholic Reporter and the Vatican Briefing podcast. My question is for Sister Pat Murray. Sister, we were told last week that you were appointed by the Pope to the Commission for the Synthesis Report. I'm wondering if you could tell us how you understand the significance of being the first woman, the first sister appointed to a Synthesis Report Commission. And I understand that group held its first meeting on Saturday. Can you give us a sense of how you understand the work of the Commission, or what you all will be seeking to do as you collate the reports and the possible drafts?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Joshua. I mean, it was an honour and a surprise to be appointed to the Commission, to the Synthesis Commission. And I think appointments such as these are symbolic. They're a statement and an indication of the desire to have women participating in decision-making. As to the work of the group, we had our first meeting. We looked, it was quite a short meeting, looking at what the task of the Synthesis Commission is, and also then what indications we would begin to give towards what the document might look like. I think there's a desire that the document would not be too long, that it would be divided into clear sections, and that there would be both areas where movement might take place, steps could be proposed for action, but at the same time, many areas for deeper reflection and revisiting and study.
Thank you. Ms. Courtney, please.
Courtney Mares with Catholic News Agency. Can you confirm that 2 bishops from mainland China are leaving the Synod Assembly early, and if so, why?
Forse per questo chiederei a Paolo Ruffini di darci una...
Sì, posso confermare che i vescovi cinesi...
The Chinese bishops will leave before the others, I think tomorrow. And the reason is pastoral needs that require their presence in their country and diocese. Thank you. Are there any more questions?
Hi, Zach Davis. America Magazine. This is for Sister Pat Murray. There's of course a historic level of women's involvement in this gathering, and it's also historic because as we heard, the topic of women deacons is being brought up. However, the view I have from the press box up there, it becomes clear that most tables only have 1 or 2 women present at them for those discussions. And we know that each participant has an equal amount of time to speak and respond, but do you feel that women are being given a just amount of time to contribute to this meeting? And secondly, can you tell us if any women have been elected as reporters for their tables?
Yeah. With regard to time, I mean, obviously there are 2 or 3 women at a table are participating in the general conversation, but I think as women we're well able to make our point and to use our time and space well. With regard to other interventions, any individual in the room is free to submit their individual reflection. So I'm sure many of the women, as I have done, have submitted our individual reflections as well as contributing that to the work in the group. So I do think, given the percentage of women in the room, I do think, quite honestly, space has been well created for the voice of women to be heard. And it's not only women, there are many others who are speaking at the tables about the importance of the role of women in the church. So there are other voices, there are other clerics, both cardinals, bishops and priests, and brothers, because not to forget that there are lay brothers present in different capacities also at the Synod. Yes, women are participating as facilitators, as rapporteurs, equally to others. They've been elected in their various groups.
Thank you, Sister Pat Murray. Mr. Di Bernardo.
Hello, Francis Di Bernardo from Bondings 2.0. The readers of my publication are primarily LGBTQ plus Catholics and the pastoral ministers who support them. They've been very inspired by the process of the Synod and the willingness that church leaders show to listening to their concerns and the joy of their Catholic faith. But some, however, are not as positive because they had lived through decades of exclusion and repression under previous popes and church leaders. So my question, and primarily for Sister Patricia, but for the others if they'd like to add, my question is, so while this new spirit of synodality is greatly welcomed as a present and future way to be church, it's important to know if there has been any discussion or if there will be anything in the report acknowledging and responding to past hurts, not just to LGBTQ plus people, but others as well. Past hurts before the spirit of synodality has begun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you for that question. I think at many of the tables, if not all, the question of hurt and the woundedness of people both individually and collectively has been dealt with and listened to. And equally, there have been discussions around how to symbolically, in a sense, represent that hurt. Some people have said sorry is not enough. So how does the church, in her own pastoral and liturgical way, give sign and symbol of seeking forgiveness for hurts that have been caused? And this is something under reflection. There are 2 more weeks to go, and how and what will appear in the final document, it would be foolish for me to say, but just to say there's a deep awareness of the pain and suffering that has been caused. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Mary. There may be a word also. Sì. Chiedo magari al professore prima e poi...
The professor first, and then Your Excellency to respond.
In fact, although it was not directed to me, being a professor of moral theology here, this is a burning issue, in fact, all over the world today. However, with my experience thus far in the synodal process, I can assure you that everybody is included. The effort is to include everybody. Include everybody. The church doesn't have issues only to do with LGBTQ. There are so many other groups. For example, as a person hailing from Asia, we have people who have only 1 meal a day. That's an issue. Due to unjust economic structures, I don't know what to comment about Africa, but certainly speaking for Asia, we have such issues also in addition to such personal orientational issues. So I would just sum up by saying synodal process is an effort not to exclude anyone, because Jesus' vision was inclusion. But if we try to isolate one of these issues, with all due respect to you who asked the question, I'm not against it, because I myself am doing what I could in my teaching and in my pastoral work. But let's not make it the issue, because there are so many issues. And last line is, this synod is not meant to address issues like other synods. It is aimed at creating a culture of inclusion through synodality. So these issues may crop up, probably, as we go ahead. Let's not forget, this is a radical conversion is called for from all in the church towards a culture of listening, culture of synodality, culture of inclusion. After all, inclusion is the issue behind the issues, behind all other issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Tirimanna, Sua Eccellenza. Please.
Perhaps I would briefly like to say that I am very happy that The Synod is very balanced, and it tries to talk about all the pain that exists in today's world and church in a very balanced way. And I personally was particularly struck by an issue when the representatives from Asia and Africa spoke about colonialism and the damage that this has caused in the countries. So this, for instance, is something that I felt very strongly in terms of feeling and listening to these direct witnesses on colonialism. So as members of the Synod, I think we are trying to let our hearts acknowledge all the pain and the wounds that everybody in the world has been affected by. So also atheism was mentioned in terms of wounds. A last thing to add on my part, and to explain to you how this conversation in spirit is taking place. Everything that unites us is the awareness that we are all loved children of God. So the effort of the Synodal Church, of a Synodal Church, is start from this, in bearing witness to the gospel. We are all children of God. And if there are persons who are marginalized, who are suffering, or who have been wounded in some way, this, of course, does concern us in our synodal path. And perhaps we can add that for everybody has their place in the church, as the Pope underscored at Lisbon. And this round of table at the moment is something that is very similar to what happens in the small groups. So you will have seen how this conversation takes place. And then on Saturday, we were also talking about the responsibility that this brings with it as a process. But of course, if there are any more questions on the part of the journalists, please feel free. Diane.
Pardon me if this doesn't come out in an articulate way. I'm thinking of several different things. I suppose if I could address my questions to Sister and to Father. Father, you just mentioned that this synod is not looking at particular issues like other synods, but rather it's synodality. And yet we know for a fact, both by what's been said from the panel as well as what participants have said, that there are definitely people who have come and are participating and are members in this synodal assembly who want concrete change to things in the church. That could be some want the blessings of homosexual unions, some want women's ordination inclusion into the diaconate. Some want a change in governance such that the governance of the church would be separated from holy orders, which would ultimately undermine the divine constitution of the Catholic Church. And in the discussions on the panel, I don't think, please correct me if I'm wrong, anybody here, you're only here today, there's not really any mention about divine revelation, apostolic tradition being the foundation, and what the Catholic Church actually believes being the foundation of our communion. Women's ordination has not been allowed by the Church. Blessings, just a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, the CDF came out with a document saying that the Church cannot bless sin, the Church cannot bless homosexual relationships. So how much is divine revelation and the apostolic tradition a foundation of these proceedings? And what is your sense of the issues that I mentioned and how it's being discussed? Thank you. Again, sorry.
Could I? Is it working?
Sì.
Could I just
yes, of course.
Try to answer, because inside your question there are so many sub-questions. I don't think I can address all of them, but the pointed one was how much of divine revelation as well as apostolic tradition is contributing to these discussions. That was the way you wound up. If you have, correct me if that is not the question. That was your question. Part of means that's the highlight. After that, if I don't answer, you may ask again. The discussions are fully enwrapped, if not fully covered by both the elements of apostolic tradition. Actually, you can't divide revelation and apostolic tradition. Apostolic tradition is part of revelation. The Word of God, apostolic tradition, magisterium, these are all part of revelation. So, divine revelation is playing a leading role. In fact, when I was giving seminars in preparation for this first assembly of the Synod, I was always saying, this is not something, as I'm repeating, I know, this is not something that suddenly fell down from heaven or something that Pope Francis has invented. These are all based on divine revelation, the synodal way itself. Okay, that's my first answer, the basic answer. But I thought you were aiming at other particular issues. You quoted me saying that I said it was not to address particular issues, but the synodal way of life. I would answer that as my winding up response. Yes, I repeat that. This is not to address particular issues. Of course, there are, as you said very rightly, I don't know your name, I can't remember.
Diane Montagna.
Right, Tanya. You said very correctly, different people have their particular issues. They wish, I have my particular issues. I wish they are brought up. She may have, he may have, the other one may have. But let's not forget, we are here a communion of believers. If each one is going to give their particular issues, we won't end up. So those particular issues will be addressed, I assure you, although I am not the Pope nor a bishop. But as an ordinary believer and as someone who is delving into Catholic tradition and Catholic traditional history of Catholic tradition, I can assure you, once the firm foundation of the synodal life is laid, I repeat, once the firm foundation of the synodal way of life is laid, those things can be built up on that. In that sense, the most important thing is not to address whether a woman can be ordained, whether LGBTQ should be accepted, whether gay marriage should be blessed. Not that they are not important. But if we are serious about a church, a universal church, a church that is worldwide, we have to lay a firm foundation that includes everybody's interests. So first we lay the foundation of the synodal way, a synodal culture, a listening culture, a culture that includes, automatically these issues are bound to come sooner, if not later.
Thank you, Professor. And now perhaps Sister Murray would like to add something.
What I would add to that is revelation and tradition are the basis from which we're working. But in constructing and in learning to be a synodal church, as I said earlier, it takes time, but it also takes, it's like entering a school of formation to learn how to be synodal. It's a series, in a way, of approaches, but it's a spiritual practice. So one of the key aspects of being a synodal person in a synodal church is to learn to have freedom. Yes, I have my own inclinations and things I would like to see happening. But if I'm really and truly entering into the synodal process, I leave those aside. I pray for freedom. I pray for the grace to be truly open to what my brother and sister are sharing and saying. I pray to God's Spirit to give me the enlightenment and the insight into where we're being drawn as a body, as this communion of people. So it's the kind of authenticity of living into this synodal way that takes prayer, takes study. I know I have to study about what being synodal means and how to deepen my sense of understanding of it, how I play my role as a member, as a synodal member here, but in my local church, in my religious family, in my parish, and how together we can discern and test the spirits. One of the interesting insights from Ignatian spirituality is learning how to evaluate what is often called consolation and desolation, a feeling of the movement, positive movement of the spirit, but a feeling of literally being desolate as the way things might be proceeding, but also learning to examine those critically, because one can be misled by feeling happy and joyous, or one can be misled by feeling in desolation and sad. So it is, what we're being invited into is not just an exercise of the head, it's an exercise of the whole person. And above all, from my own lived experience of life, it is a spiritual practice which requires learning, accompaniment, study, and above all, prayer and trust in God's Spirit. Thank you. I know that's a complicated answer, and you may say you didn't answer my question, but I think unless we learn the importance of formation for this way of life, we'll be frustrated and we won't understand what's actually happening and what we're being called to. And we're called to really to live a fullness of our personhood, both spiritually and psychologically, emotionally. And I think it's a call to become a full human being.
Thank you, Sister Patricia. I think His Excellency wanted to.
Io vorrei brevemente aggiungere che per me
I would like to briefly add that for me, the most important thing is that in the small groups and in the whole, there is the freedom to express ourselves and express our opinion. This is the third week in the Synod, and we are at the third small group, in a third small group. So we've got to know each other quite well. I've heard so many voices and so many opinions. And it is important that even though a person expresses an opinion that I may not agree with, or I may totally disagree with, nobody gets angry, because we can all freely express our own convictions, our own ideas, and this, I think, is important. And then this synod truly is a synod on synodality. At the end, I don't think that, this is my opinion, there's not going to be a decision whether we can bless or not gay couples. Our problem is rather how to tell everyone, including the members of the LGBTQ community, that they are part of the Church, that the Catholic Church is open to everyone. This is important. Thank you, Your Excellency. Please, Michael.
Thank you very much. Michael Haynes for Lifesite News. Dr. Ruffini, I think you mentioned last week that the discussion groups were looking at new pastoral approaches for gay couples within the context of the discussions you're having. Obviously, it comes in light of a number of interviews Cardinal Fernandez made over the summer, in which he expressed an openness to performing blessings for same-sex couples. Now, those comments he made, obviously, they weren't in contradiction with the CDF's 2021 note, which prohibited the blessing of such couples. Can you confirm whether the discussions in the Synod have been based on the Vatican's note? I think it was 1986. The CDF released the document on the pastoral care of homosexual persons, and it said that a truly pastoral approach would appreciate the need for homosexual persons to avoid the near occasion of sin. Can you confirm whether that Catholic teaching is being reflected in the discussions you've been having? Thank you very much.
Non so se ho capito benissimo la domanda e comunque rispondo per come ho capito. Certamente l'insegnamento cattolico è alla base di tutto quello che noi stiamo dicendo, l'insegnamento cattolico, la rivelazione, il Vangelo, gli Atti degli Apostoli. Non è nemmeno, per quello che posso testimoniare io, naturalmente io sono in un circolo minore, non in tutti e 35, però sono lì, posso dire in generale dei miei circoli
Tell you about the three small groups in which I have taken part, and I can tell you about the conversation that takes place in the assembly. This is not the central topic of our conversation. So if you think that we are discussing this primarily, this is not the case. And we have talked about the topics that we have exchanges on. We talked about the topic of formation, the relationship between ordained and not ordained ministry, what is the ordained ministry, what is the option for the poor, and how colonialism may have what the wounds of colonialism, how we can evangelize cultures starting from their own cultures. So we are speaking about this first and foremost. So the blessing of same-sex couple or gay couples is not the topic of the Synod. We can mention it, as His Excellency was saying, we can mention this from a different perspective. In other words, if we are all children of God, if the Church is called upon to bear witness to the gospel with everyone, it doesn't mean that this is only the case with some. We are speaking about the way in which the Church is one, the way in which it is a welcoming church, the way in which it is inclusive. Sometimes we place ourselves on a pedestal and not wanting to do so, we wound the others because of clericalism or because of other reasons. This is what we are discussing primarily. And as the professor was just saying, the topic of synodality is a central one. In other words, how the Church is rediscovering her calling to communion, which is in the gospel, in which way are really all limbs of the same body. This is what is the center of our conversation. And everything is based on the gospel and based on the tradition of the Church. We are all faithful and believers. And as the prefect and the president of the Commission for Information is also based on the answer that the professor gave before, and Sister Patricia and His Excellency, I'm sure that they have given you an answer. So I would now conclude this press conference. We will have the chance of meeting again. We're going to see you again tomorrow morning for the press conference and for the briefing. Yes, there's going to be a briefing again tomorrow. I think it's still going to be the same time. So there's going to be a press conference at 12. And then at 2:15, we're going to meet again. I would like to thank our speakers for being here and for being available. I would like to thank the prefect, Sheila, and I would like to thank the journalists who are here. I would like to thank the interpreters we sometimes need to thank them because they are here every day, as well as the technicians who make this meeting possible and who help us broadcast it to other countries where there are great expectations. Another thing that we did not mention today, it is the celebration, the anniversary of the deportation of the Jews of Rome, and this is something I wanted to share with you. It's 80 years today, so let us keep this in our hearts. Thank you and all the best for your work.
And our live broadcast is concluding with that note from Matteo Bruni, the director of the Holy See Press Office. Once again, you've been listening to Vatican Radio's coverage of the press briefing for the 16th General Ordinary Assembly of the Synod of Bishops. Thank you all for listening. Laudetur Jesus Christus.
Dear Christians and all people of goodwill, we are sending you this message once more from the Vatican in this second week of work in the Synod of Synodality, where, as I told you, we have had over 380 delegates, more than 200 bishops, priests, religious, and laity who also joined in. And it's been a wonderful moment of sharing in which, around the Holy Father, we are able to reflect on several topics, working together in this spirit of synodality, of working together. Of course, Rome and the Vatican is the heart of Christianity in a special way. This is where St. Peter is buried. This is where the martyrdom of St. Peter and St. Paul occurred as a first witness. So it's a way of coming back to rediscover and strengthen our faith in God, in our creed, in what we profess. We want to thank you very much for the prayers. We've been asking constantly for prayers, and we experience that strength of prayers that you accompany us in our work, and we pray that the Holy Spirit will guide us in the remaining days and the remaining weeks. In this time of reflection, several things have come, and I think it's worth also to give thanks to God that you see that we have different experiences in various areas and in various parts of the world. And we as a church in Africa have also a lot to offer even to the universal church. Amongst the things that obviously have come are the joy of our church, the understanding of our community, and the strength of communion that we in Africa experience more this community than in many parts of the world. It has been very good to experience that, call it cross-pollination, that sharing of experiences that we are given one church in one place to another. We've also spoken a lot about the core responsibility, that every baptized Christian is responsible for the mission of the church, for the work of the church. The church does not belong to the priests and the bishops and the religious, but to every baptized person. So the emphasis on the baptismal mandate, the baptismal sense of that you're baptized, you have a mission, you are mandated to be part of the church, and to wherever you are to show the face of Christ. This is something we have gone over and over again, trying to see why is it that more often now we see the lay people thinking that they are not representing the church, and they are not representing Christ enough in their normal life. So how can we awaken that reality? So that's one of the things which we are discussing. At the same time, of course, to make we, the leaders of the church, bishops, priests, and those who have been given responsibility, how can we encourage? How can we assist? How can we give more space also to the lay people, to others who have got gifts in the church, so that really it can help build our dioceses, our parishes, and even the evangelization work. So those are part of the things that we are discussing, and I'm sure God will guide us into worthy conclusions. From here, we also send this message to our churches, to the church in Africa, to our parishes. And I think as we had this synodal journey at the beginning in our own dioceses, now it's time for us to also start seeing how we can put into practice by awakening that calling wherever each one of us is. It's time we took more seriously our Christian calling. It's time we are more coherent wherever you are, whatever you do. We must seek coherence of our faith. We cannot live two lives. It's time that we let Christ fully shine to become salt and light of the world. This is a challenge we give you from Rome. We give you the greetings of all the bishops, especially of the Mpesa, who we are with here, and also our Bishop Chair of the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, Archbishop Martin Kivuva, who is also here with us. May God bless you and continue accompanying us from wherever you are in this wonderful moment of grace. God bless you.
Capuchin TV.
Forward ever, backward never. Let us move ahead and so on. Even children, kuna kakitu tunaweza